This live presentation was produced in Ashland, Oregon by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. RVML relies on the support of our volunteers, members, and donors to organize and present these programs. For more information about this presentation, or to borrow, download, or purchase other recordings from our catalog, please visit our website at rvml.org.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here. This is really the only time I've had an opportunity to spend any time in Ashland. And it's a very interesting town. Very, very interesting. I want to check and make sure this microphone is live. Are we live? Okay. So ordinarily, you know, a conservative old businessman doesn't make rash statements. At least if you're in the business world, you don't make rash statements, all right? So my old business friends would probably not approve of this, but this is what we're going to talk about tonight, and that is that 90%, 97% of what you grew up believing is a lie. We're also going to talk about creating the cosmic paradigm, which is the title of this little book, which follows pretty much what we're going to talk about tonight. That's the third book. There's two others back there, Decimal and Trillion. Mostly what I want to talk about tonight is that it is time to just stop talking about all of this. You know, I got a hold of some tapes. These are radio tapes from 1955, 54, 53. This was Long John Neville out of New York City. And Long John was the Art Bell of his day, and he was interviewing all of these early pioneers in the whole world of extraterrestrials, and they were talking. It sounded like the same kind of stuff you hear today. So this talking has been going on for 50 years, and I'd like to take a small step tonight to stop talking and maybe start doing. And maybe that's the reason I'm mixed up in this, is because I would much rather do than talk. I spent a number of years as an entrepreneur. Prior to that, I was with two large companies, one Motorola, one called 3M, little companies. I spent about 25 years as a venture capitalist. Now, a venture capitalist goes and invest money for other people in startup companies. And we did 50 startup companies all over the country, all the way from Boston to San Diego and everywhere in between. If you've been to the hospital recently or had occasion to be in the hospital, you probably had this little thing clipped on your finger called an oximeter, okay? And it measures your blood oxygen level. Well, I gave a couple of guys in Boulder, Colorado, the initial $25,000 to make the first oximeter. That was back in 1978. So I go back a ways with this. This is one of the very first digital credit cards with a magnetic stripe on it. Back in 1969, a long time ago, we made some of these. And then in 1970, one of the companies I was with, and I was involved in a small company down in Southern California, we installed the first, we called it a currency vendor at that time. You now know it as an ATM. So that first ATM was installed in Columbus, Ohio, and we made the magnetic encoding equipment for it. And we made the first swipe reader, that thing that sits next to the cash register, you know. So any of you having credit card problems, please don't talk to me, okay? But anyway, this is one of the very first magnetic stripe credit cards. And then if you've flown on the airlines, you know, they take your ticket and they put it through that thing. We made the first one of those in 1971. So as an entrepreneur, I was very involved in the world of business, deeply, deeply involved. I was so involved, as a matter of fact, that I was working for a division of one of these large companies, down in Southern California. And at that time I had a girlfriend. She lived out in Palm Springs. And so I went out to visit her. And her father, come on, want to talk to you. I figured, oh boy, what did I do now? So he called me into the study and showed me a book. And the book on the front it said, Top Secret, United States Air Force, Project Blue Book. Now this was 1964. Now I don't know whether that was one of the real Project Blue Books or it was one that the Air Force had kind of allowed to leak. But it was full of pictures of what we now call UFOs. In those days we called them flying saucers. All right? Lots of flying saucers, wonderful pictures. They had all been taken by Air Force personnel, Navy, Marine Air, that type of thing. Really great pictures. We went out to dinner, we talked about it. I went back to work the next day and forgot about it. Now, I probably consciously put it, way in the back of my mind, but I didn't spend a lot of time worrying about that kind of stuff. I was busy. So this is the part of my life where I was unconscious. And then something happened to me in 1987. I didn't understand that it was happening at that time, but in 1987, I had some, what we will call paranormal experiences, all right? And we'll get into them a little bit further. But that was my tap on the shoulder, my wake-up call. And basically, what that resulted in is that I went to work after a week of these paranormal experiences, and my business partners said, Mark, you're different. Something's wrong. You no longer have you're no longer the eagle with the blood on your beak. You're not this hard-charging business guy anymore. What's going on? And I said, I really like this me. I'm happy. And they said, I don't think so. This doesn't work anymore. So I finally wound up leaving the venture capital business. And then I had decided I would leave the business and go back to school to get a master's in psychology. All right, something different. Figure out what all these crazy entrepreneurs and so this was 97. And I was sitting down one day, supposed to be typing an academic paper, and all of a sudden this book starts spilling out. Trillion came out. It came out in about 90 days. And, I'm an old business guy. I don't write books, particularly stories and that kind of thing. But Trillion was done in about 90 days. Now, it was pretty rough. And I had to go back and take some classes and figure out how to write a really good story. But Trillion is a page turner. But then all of a sudden I find out, after it's gone around the world and it's now out in paperback, that people read this and they say, but this is the story of my life. How did you know? So there's a lot of truth in Trillion. So that came out. We published that in 2001. About that same time, I had the privilege of getting to know Stephen Greer and the Disclosure Project. This is a poor photograph of 22 people standing up at the National Press Club in Washington, D.C., very prestigious place, and talking about all that they knew about UFOs, their contact with extraterrestrials, 22 top government and military people. Now, in the audience were all of the major newspapers, the wire services, all the major networks, and of course, it made all the papers. You remember that? No, I don't either. It never made it, right? Never made it anywhere. So at that time, I became a knower. Now, there was another piece of this knower that happened, and that is I was out with a group of people. We were out in the field, very first night. And we were sitting around. It had just gotten dark. And all of a sudden, here were these 4 squares, perfect squares, as though there was a train coming across the sky and someone had opened up the windows, kind of a light yellow color. And they were, the individual squares were larger than my thumb. Now, you don't fine squares just hanging up there in the sky. And a lot of the other people saw them, and they just hung there. It was great. So that was my first experience with some sort of a visual UFO, if you will. We went on for the better part of a week. I saw ET craft materialize. They were there, and they went through the materialization process. Bang, there they are. So it was quite an eye-opener. And so I became what I call a knower. I know. And in fact, the subtitle of Trillion is, once you know, you can't go back to merely believing it. All right? It changes you. It changed me. Decimal came out because there was too much to put out in one book, Trillion. Decimal is about to cover up the reverse engineering that goes on from the crashes of the ET craft. This is a website. I invite you to visit there. On this website, we post every day the news from around the world about crop circles, all the sightings of UFOs, a lot about the environment. You can go there. It's updated daily. I don't do it. I have someone that helps me do it. But it's free. Doesn't cost anything. Just go Cosmic Paradigm, look up current news, and it's there. There's over 1,000 pages. We've been doing this for several years now. Lots going on, particularly in other parts of the world. Much more than here. As I said, this small book came out. This was just published in January. Creating the Cosmic Paradigm. All right, let's get into it now. We're going to talk about UFOs and ETs and that type of thing. At least that's where we're going to start. This is a picture from the 15th century. Now, in the 15th century, there were no hot air balloons. That was not known. In the 15th century, there were no spacecraft, no airplanes, that type of thing. So the artist had to know something when he painted that picture. Had to have seen something. This is another one. This is called the UFO of the Madonna. If you look in the background there, you can see a flying ship. You can see a man and a dog. The artist had to go and see something. This is a picture, and I don't know how true the picture is, but the story has been verified. This is a picture of 1939. This is Nazi Germany, and they're in the process of reverse engineering a crashed ET craft. There were 3 crashes that happened prior to the Second World War. One was in Brazil in 1931, and another one in the Black Forest in 1938. When the Allies came in and took over Germany, they found some of the evidence that the Germans had been working on these flying saucers, if you will. So this is a technology that's been around a while. This is the Battle of Los Angeles. Anybody know about the Battle of Los Angeles? Okay. Battle of Los Angeles, 1942, early 1942. Keep in mind, Pearl Harbor happened in late 1941. So everybody down in LA was worried about Japanese invasions. This is what came and hovered over downtown Los Angeles. There's a craft, there's the spotlights. Those smaller dots there are the artillery that they're firing at this craft. There were 6 people that died from the falling shrapnel. It woke up the entire town. Now, that's the front page of the LA Times. It didn't go anywhere else. And the next day, of course, everybody went back to fighting the war. All right? A number of people have said, Mark, why don't they just land on the White House lawn? Well, this is 1952. They came pretty close because they hovered over the nation's capital for several hours. We sent fighters up to chase them off. All they did was just kind of wink out. When the fighters left, they came back. They were there for several hours, hanging over the Capitol in Washington, D.C. This is a crop circle. This is about 3 weeks old now. It came off my website. Again, you can get all the pictures of the recent crop circles there. And here's some folks sitting in that particular crop circle. This is over in the south of England. Now this next is not particularly good video, but it's something I think you'll find. Oops, this one's here. These are crop circles from around the world, all right? Different sizes, different shapes. They're absolutely beautiful, just absolutely incredible. Here we go. Watch this rather carefully. You'll see a crop circle being made. See the orbs? See the formation of the crop circle? Interesting, huh? Now everybody says, well, they're made by these guys out there stomping around with boards, okay? Well, here's one that wasn't made that way. Let's watch it again. This is a little better picture. Again, this is over in the south of England. Nice little crop circle. This is a triangle that appeared over Belgium, 1989. It stuck around for quite a while. Thousands of people saw this. The Belgian military sent airplanes up not to go and confront it, but simply to send them up to get photographs. And there's radar. All of this is on my website. You can see the radar traces, that type of thing. Here's the path it took, these small blue dots there. Again, thousands of people saw this. The Cometa report was prepared for President Charles Chirac. He assembled these people, some of his top military and scientific people. This came out in 1999. These are the events they studied, events from around France, but also around the world. They spent 2 years preparing this report to Chirac. And here's the conclusions of that report. That these UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin. And that they were not a threat to the national security of France. There's a wonderful new video out. I suggest you get it. This is a video about the Phoenix Lights. There was a large triangular craft that came and was first spotted over Flagstaff, and then people reported it all the way over Phoenix, all the way down to Tucson. About a mile across. This was a big one. Lots of lights, moving very slowly at about maybe 5-10 miles an hour. Thousands of people. Now, initially, all of it was dismissed until a very courageous councilwoman from the Phoenix City Council decided she had seen this and she was going to go and investigate it. And so she created this wonderful video. It's been analyzed. There's good video. There's lots of good testimony from now hundreds of people that have come forward talking about the Phoenix Lights. I'm not trying to sell Georgina's book here, just to point out that she spent 4 years putting this book together, 4 years investigating what's now known as the Rendlesham incident. Rendlesham is a location northeast of London. There's 2 military bases there, both U.S. At the time that happened, there were nuclear weapons there in place. What she found is that there was layer after layer after layer, because there were lots of reports about the fact that there had been UFOs hanging around there, and in fact one had landed and some beings had gotten off. The whole thing then was a gigantic cover-up until the British government came clean, finally, in the end of 2002. Now you can go on the internet and you can find 400 pages of testimony. All right, all the records, all of that about Rendlesham. And it wasn't a lighthouse, that yes, it did land. And there's actually audio of an interview with Charles Holt, who was the commander of the British forces, and a conversation he recalls having with an ET. This is my favorite. This is a video and testimony from 7 different airline pilots. This is a meteor that came down over Turkey. Large meteor, the size of a 747, big chunk of rock. And it was coming in over Turkey, over the landmass. This small ET craft in the red circle there came in, fragmented it into a number of pieces, and escorted it out and dumped it into the Aegean. All right? Now this made every newspaper in Europe. It made primetime television all over Europe. We didn't hear it, right? We didn't hear it. This is Mexico. This happened about a year ago. A Mexican reconnaissance airplane was up, and it was photographing, and all of a sudden it encountered ball lightning. Now you know how ball lightning flies in formation like this? You know how it does that? 16 of these ball lightnings, all in formation like this, going in and out of clouds, all that kind of stuff. So anyway, the Mexican government made this public and made all the radar traces, all the photographic evidence, and all that type of thing. And of course made all the newspapers in Mexico. And then just about 2 months ago, the government of Brazil announced that they are going to go and come clean with 50 years. They've been covering up all the UFO incidents in Brazil. 50 years. And they announced that they were going to go and make a big announcement. What's more interesting than the announcement is that since then, there has not been one word about anything to do with Brazil and UFOs. Nothing. Let's take a moment and talk about extraterrestrials and my definition, okay? Yes?
Did you mean that Brazil didn't release those records?
Nothing. They made the announcement that they were going to.
But they didn't?
Nothing has happened.
Oh.
Nothing. And we can all speculate as to why that happened. So let's take a moment and get a definition of extraterrestrial, all right? This is the dictionary definition of extraterrestrial. This is my definition. I'd like to look at these things as conscious life forms, because I have to tell you, when you are seeing one of these partially materialized entities, you don't know whether it's a physical being from another planet who's decided to come in and not fully make themselves visible, or whether it's an angel or a spirit or something like that that has decided to come in and make themselves partially visible. So I go in, from this point forward, we're going to talk about conscious life forms, all right? And we're going to lump it all together, because I can tell you, I can't tell the difference, and I challenge any of you. We're talking in general with fifth dimensional beings here, highly evolved. I mean, they have to be technologically fairly evolved to get here, right? Or maybe they're already here. Another way to look at this is that there's the non-resident non-humans, and there's the non-resident humans, and then there's the resident non-humans. Okay, and that's not us. We're the resident humans, right?
Right.
But there are some resident non-humans, and there may be some here tonight. I don't know. One way that people look at this is as a spectrum in terms of frequency, in terms of energy. We're kind of at the bottom. All right, we're at the bottom. The only thing that's lower than us is probably this table and maybe the ground. All right, so we're looking at frequencies. And as we go up in frequencies, we get to the ETs and the celestials. And somewhere on that spectrum, way, way up, and I put the divine there, but I'm quite sure it's higher than that, way off the chart. We're over here. We're in this. What we're doing right now is something that science can measure. They can go and measure sound and light and physical presence. You know, and with the microscopes, they can measure down to the atomic level. And with the telescopes, they can measure to the edge of the universe. And they've now calculated the mass of the universe by calculating the mass of the sun and the rotation of the earth and all that. They know how big that universe ought to be. And if they put together all of the known stars and the dark matter and the planets and everything they're discovering, they can come up to 15% of the theoretical mass of the universe. So there's a whole lot missing. There's a whole lot by their own definitions that science cannot go and account for. So the way I look at this is that at least 85% is the non-physical. These are sketches of the Palladians. These were made by Billy Meyer back in the 70s. I find it really interesting that they all have a lot of hair. They're very proud of the fact that they have hair. You know, a lot of the modern pictures of ETs don't show them with a lot of hair, all right? But these are very proud people. And then there's these little guys, these little grays. All right? Yeah. Now, a lot of the pictures you're going to see of these gray guys they don't look so friendly, right? Now, I have to tell you, I'll tell you the Arnie story at this point. My wife and I are traveling by RV, and we're going and making these stops like this and giving talks. I had given a talk like this about a year ago in Colorado, and right after the talk, a man came up to me and he said, "I have to talk to you. I have to talk to you." Yeah, one of those. I said, okay. I mean, this happens almost every time. And so he said, something happened. I said, okay, come on, we'll walk over here and we'll talk. And he said, I was supposed to have a medical procedure this morning, and I had a dream last night, and the dream told me to be here today. And so I drove down and I parked my camper over here. He pointed to it. I said, okay. And he said, and this is what showed up in my camper this morning. And he had a sketch of a little gray guy like this. And the gray guy said, Arnie, I was supposed to come hear your talk. And at this point I'm going like, oh God, what's this going on? You know, this is more than I can handle. And, but it gets better, it gets better. So just about a month ago, we were back in that same location, and we had parked our RV for the night, and here was this little camper over here. And sure enough, here comes Arnie. He comes marching over, and I said, "Is that you?" He said, "Yes." And I said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "I don't know what I'm doing here." "Okay, I just parked my RV here for tonight, but I have a message for you." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "The message is that there's going to be an evacuation very soon." I said, "An evacuation?" He said, yeah, there's going to be an evacuation. And I said, "Okay, tell me about that." He said, "Well, they're going to evacuate the people that they're then going to bring back to restart this whole place after the collapse." And I said, "Oh, gee, that's something I hadn't heard before." So I researched that. We'll talk some more about that later. No, we have to talk about that, because that is, if you go on the internet, you can find 2 or 3 places now where there's channeled information coming from specific ETs that are talking about an evacuation, okay, wiping out the current situation, and then bringing people back to get it restarted. In addition to the off-planet humans, this is my old business background. You recognize that? Nice organization chart. Paul, you'll know what that is. Yeah. So it's something like this, but it's not like that. It's probably more like this, okay? It's round, and it's fluid, and probably doesn't have much structure to it, but there definitely is a hierarchy out there. There definitely is somebody in charge. We just didn't happen through chaos or whatever you want to believe. All right. So if all of this that I'm talking about is true, stop for a moment and think about the implications. Just stop for a moment. If all of this is true, think of the implications. The media, and we're not going to go any further into this other than just a few comments, but the media hasn't been telling us the truth. Our politicians, well, we know they don't tell the truth. And then you've got, just go down the line, you've got religion and economics and science and medicine and education and psychology. It impacts every area of our life if all of this extraterrestrial stuff is true. It's true for me. I have seen it. It was a great wake-up call. So there has been a cover-up, no doubt about that. The people from military intelligence are now telling us that about 80% of the UFOs we see, that people see in the sky, are man-made. They're ours. About 80%. And I didn't believe that until you get 3 or 4 people saying that, and all of a sudden it's, well, okay, that must be right. 80%. And the others, people that are saying, well, it's gotten to be fairly dangerous for the ET craft to come here anymore, so we're doing holographic projections. We are so good at this that we can go and do a holographic projection in the sky, we being the ETs, and we'll make you think that there's a solid craft there. And it's a whole lot safer because if you shoot at the hologram, it doesn't hurt so much. Most of the contact with extraterrestrials happens in some state other than full consciousness. And this is verified by, I've now had the opportunity to probably talk with about 200 people that have had ongoing contact with ETs. There are an amazing number of people out there that have had this experience. And most of it is not the concrete stuff where you walk up and shake hands with one of them, okay? It just doesn't work that way. We're talking about the different, less than conscious levels of the brain here. Lucid dreaming, if you will, the alpha state, that type of thing. That's when this is happening. But that doesn't make it less real. It's every bit as real. So what you might think of, as a dream or a lucid dream sometime could very well be real contact. We've been told by the ETs that they have now contacted several million people around the planet. Several million. We know that the contact happens a whole lot more other than in the United States. Now we know that because people over there are. I was in Costa Rica about 9 months ago. I got off the airplane in Costa Rica. I was interviewed by 3 of the major newspapers, and I was on primetime television that night. Now, everybody down there has a story about their contact with ETs and the UFOs they saw and all this kind of stuff. All the major, editors of all the newspapers and the television interviewers and everybody. It's like wide open. It's amazing. It's so much different than it is here in the U.S. So much different. I've also learned that it is possible to initiate contact with extraterrestrials, that you can ask for it, that there is a protocol where you can go and learn how to do this. If anybody wants to know about that, you can talk to me later. But it's called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. where you actually go out and ask for it. You do it through a meditative process, and it works. It works. I've had it work.
Any guarantees that the experience is going to be friendly?
Yes, everything that I have experienced has been friendly. Now, that doesn't mean that it's not shocking and dramatic and just way out of any normal context, but ultimately it's very friendly. Yeah. And you do a great segue into this next comment, which is that less than 1% of, and this is documented by all the reports of contact that have been happening now for the last 50 years, you know, less than 1% of this is what you might call the abduction, where different things are done to people. Those are the exception to the rule. For every one of those, I know 100 people that have had really wonderful experiences. But these happen. These abusive abductions do happen. And I fought that notion for a long time because I have a very benevolent view of the universe, okay? But I now have met people where they have been abducted and they've had things done to them. One of the more interesting stories is that this one woman, Leah was abducted, okay? And it happened 3 or 4 or 5 times. And one time, apparently, the mind control wasn't working too well, and she looked at one of these characters very carefully, and she noticed that the stitching around the almond eyes wasn't really very good. The stitching, okay? So the guy had a mask on, and he was posing as an extraterrestrial and was doing experiments on her. She's written several books, and she's not the only one out there talking like this, all right? So there's a lot of misinformation in this whole arena of all these alien abductions. Okay, now we can get into the part of the talk that's sure to offend at least 2 or 3 of you, all right? If you really go back and study the book of Ezekiel in the Bible, and you do it from a modern perspective, you will probably find that what Ezekiel really was describing was this, not what we traditionally have believed. All right, he was really describing a circular saucer, an extraterrestrial craft. This is from Egypt, 1500 BC. This is from one of the tombs. Now, does anyone see anything that doesn't look quite right there? Yes. Now, where did that come from? Okay. This has been sitting in a tomb, you know. They've been looking at this along with all the hieroglyphics, and somebody finally took a close look, and it's like, oh, there's some modern things going on there. And then, of course, we have the pyramids down in the Central America. These are the Mayans. Their story, you know, is very much one of, well, of course, we have ongoing contact with extraterrestrials. We have had them historically. They helped us build our pyramids. And we don't differentiate between the physical and the spiritual. And that's a theme through a lot of the indigenous cultures. They don't compartmentalize the way we do. And that's the Aborigines and the Mayans and all of the indigenous peoples, the Native Americans. A Kachina doll. If you go and you talk to the Hopis in Arizona, the Hopis have a very, very solid religion. They have an understanding of the fact that extraterrestrials came and helped them settle where they are, guided them, and they make representations of the extraterrestrials and call them Kachina dolls. Now, the extraterrestrials for them live in San Francisco Peak, which is just north of Flagstaff. Kachina dolls. These are tablets from ancient Sumeria. Sumeria is that wonderful part of the world we now know as Iraq, between the Tigris and the Euphrates rivers over there. These have been sitting in the British Museum for almost 100 years. And then someone by the name of Zechariah Sitchin came along and started doing translations on them, looking at it not from a Judeo-Christian standpoint, but looking at it from the standpoint of what might these writings be. And the story that is told here is of the Anunnaki, who came here about 400,000 years ago. They found some subhumans, and they did some genetic engineering and created Homo sapiens. And that's the story on these clay tablets. And there are hundreds of these. There were a lot more in the basement of the museum in Baghdad. They've now disappeared. But anyway, the story is very... Sitchin has about a dozen books out on this. Highly recommended. My conclusion, and again, let's be real clear here. I am giving you my understanding of what this whole extraterrestrial thing is all about. My understanding of having now investigated this since 1987. I have come to the conclusion, and this is fairly recent, this is just the last couple of years, that we indeed are descendant from extraterrestrials, that they brought life here, they planted it, they engineered us. We are the product of that. As I said, I've had the opportunity to talk now with several hundred people, and there are some very consistent messages that these people give us that they have obtained from the ETs. And the first one is really very obvious. I mean, hey, we're here. And we're here from the other side of the galaxy, and we have figured out how to travel faster than the speed of light. That was one of the things, incidentally, that really hung me up for a long time. I have an engineering degree, so I believe that Einstein was right when he said nothing can travel faster than the speed of light, but he really said nothing material can travel faster than the speed of light. When I saw one of these ET craft materialize, then I understand how they did it. They dematerialize, all right? So yes, they have extraordinary technology. They are here, we know, from some 57 different star systems. 57. That comes out of testimony from the military intelligence. And they have skills because all of this interaction with ETs happens on a telepathic level. It's all telepathic. They don't, well, I can't say they never, because sometimes they do, some of the Palladians will go and communicate in English. They tell us that they seeded life here, that they are our ancestors. And that's a very consistent story that happens over and over and over again. Now, there's two different stories that there's a branch that goes here now. One branch says, we're here, we want to help you because we seeded you and you are our progeny. Okay? We want to help you. We want to help you grow up. And then there's the others that say, well, hey, you look like you could be had. And so there's a chess game going on here, okay? And that's the best way to think of it. I don't talk in terms of good and bad. I can't go there. But there are those that are trying to be helpful, and that there are those who are pursuing their own agenda. Think of it that way. Some of the other consistent messages are, folks, you have an environmental crisis. You've had it. It's continuing. It's getting worse. It's not getting better. We can see it. We can see it from a million miles away that this planet is degenerating and degenerating very fast. faster than you realize. In fact, a lot of it is probably not reversible. And then they're saying that, you know, you're using a lot of chemicals you don't need to use. You're ingesting them, you're putting them on your crops, you're making things out of chemicals you probably don't need to be making, and it's polluting your bodies, and it's actually changing your DNA very slightly. And then there's the whole electromagnetics. You know, I was at Motorola when we installed the first cell phone, and that happened in Chicago in 1974. We put the first cell phone in, and at that time there was some research that said, well, if you hold this thing up next to your head, you know, it's going to have some impact at the cellular level. And now there are some class action suits that are beginning to form against the cell phone manufacturers due to the incidence of brain cancer, predominantly on the right side, with people that use the cell phones too much. The ETs have been telling us this since 1975. Okay, the electromagnetics are way out of control here, folks. I had a cell phone installed in my truck. I wanted a permanent one for the cab because we're hauling a big trailer. And so I went into the local distributor there in Colorado, and I said, you know, I need one of these. And I said, I want to be sure there's no radiation in the cab. And he said, I know exactly what you want. We do this all the time, and I have one in my own truck because the amount of radiation is just out of sight because you've got broadcast antennas and you've got cell phone antennas transmitting in the police and television, everything. It's just a mess. And this was in a fairly small town in Colorado. See? And this was a Motorola distributor. And he said, if I can help get the message out about how bad this is, let me know.
Does wearing a headset help?
Well, no, in the cab, it's permanent, and it's a speakerphone type of arrangement. Yeah.
And you're saying that's a good
That works because you don't get any radiation. If you are holding it up to your head, you're getting radiated. And actually, if you have one of the headsets, that's worse. Yeah. There are ways to get around that. If you want to talk to me later, I'll tell you about that. Yeah. The ETs are also telling us that there is another planet not very far away in this galaxy that's self-destructed, and that we're in about the same boat. Now that particular one self-destructed from nuclear war. And you stop and think about, you know, how close are we, even though we have, quote, disarmed, we still have more than enough nukes to go and wipe the whole planet out. Again, most of them are telling us they're here to help us, but they're saying, we're not going to come here and save you. You know how well our welfare systems have worked? You know, you start giving handouts to people, and pretty soon, after a generation or two, they don't know anything else other than handouts. And they're saying, we don't want a planet of dependence. We don't want that to happen. What do we want? A whole planet full of dependent people. You have to go and do it yourselves. We'll help you, we'll coach you, but we're not going to come and do it. They're saying that the current situation will not persist for long. There are earth shifts that are already happening. The tsunami was just a wake-up call. There are cosmic energies. We're being bombarded now with some extraordinary cosmic energies. They're coming from the center of the galaxy, more than has been recorded any time since modern science has been to the place where they can record that. And they're very unusual energies. They haven't been seen before. They started about a year ago. This is all part of the shift. And then they're saying to us that your institutions have all been set up based on a current paradigm of oil, of power, of money, And all of those are going to go away. They're going to go away. And they're saying also that our DNA is being re-engineered. That one of the ways in which we have been controlled these years is that we don't have all of the DNAs connected, but they're now beginning to rewire us. And another piece of this is they're saying there's going to be a transition to a fifth dimension. So various messages, bits and pieces. I don't know how all this plays out. All I know is that I'm getting from various sources, people are sending it to me, calling, writing, meetings like this, and it's accelerating. It's becoming more evident all the time. I don't know which of these scenarios plays out or whether they all play out, but it's interesting that they're all happening at the same time. It's not just one we're focusing, it's not just the environment, it's all of these things coming together. This is a kind of a pretty iceberg. It came off the shelf down off the Antarctic. This is an interesting picture of an iceberg. I don't know if you've ever seen one like this before. Okay. The U.S. military, the Navy, is now towing icebergs like this out of the North Atlantic shipping lanes on a regular basis. And this is something that has just started the last 2 years. This shows a chunk of the Antarctic. Here's where it was in 1995. Here we are in January of 2002. Here we are in February, and here we are in March. So this is just one chunk of the Antarctic and how quickly it's melting. And the whole continent is melting like that. And the result of this, and this is finally beginning to come out in some of the current newspapers, it's slowing down the ocean currents because of all the fresh water being dumped into the oceans. It's slowing down the ocean currents. Now, normally, this is the Gulf current that comes up out of the Caribbean and warms the East Coast and goes over and warms Northern Europe. It has slowed down. So that means that these tropical waters here are warmer, and guess what? We have a whole new batch of hurricanes this year, like we had last year, and they're more severe than they have been in a long, long time. There's a new study out of the UK. And this study says that since 1980, this is the warmest it has been for 2,000 years. They've gone back, they've taken core samples of ice and measured tree rings and things like that. 2,000 years, the warmest it's been in 2,000 years. So if you find a little warm today, that's maybe what's going on. This is a picture of a strip mine. This is the best one I could find. There's not a lot of pictures around of strip mines. And I understand that Michael Rupert spoke here not too long ago about peak oil, so I won't spend much time talking about peak oil, but it's real. I have geologist friends that have been predicting peak oil for 25 years, and now it's happened. In fact, most of the consensus seems to say that it happened in 2000. So we're 5 years into it. And of course, we notice that we've invaded to secure the oil over there in the Middle East, and now my gasoline costs $1 more a gallon than it did before we invaded. I can't quite figure that one out. In 2004, we destroyed 9,500 square miles of rainforest. 9,500 square. That's the size of the state of Vermont. (9,500 square miles). And of course, you know, some of the residents aren't really too happy about that. We don't really care about them, do we? And then there's water. 20% of the world's population wakes up every day not knowing where they're going to get potable water. 20%. That's over 1 billion people. Now we're going to come back, we're going to take a little break, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk some more about this, and then we're going to talk about what we can do about it. We've raised this up a little bit, and for you folks in the back, I don't expect you to go and read this. I'm going to go through a few of these things. This is a part of the talk that some people find a little incredulous, but all of these have been documented. In 1940, 400 prisoners in Chicago were purposely infected with malaria against their wishes, just to see what the effect would be. In 1950, the U.S. Navy sprayed a cloud of bacteria from ships over San Francisco and then sent Navy personnel in to see what the effects were. In 56, they sprayed mosquitoes, loosed them infected with yellow fever over Avon Park, Florida, just to see what the effects would be of yellow fever. In 1970, there were some molecular biology techniques were used to produce the first AIDS-like retrovirus. In 81, the first case of AIDS was confirmed in homosexual men in New York, Los Angeles, and San Francisco, not in Africa. It wasn't until later that AIDS was reported in Africa. I'm going to skip through this because most of this is about the fact that the AIDS virus probably has been engineered. It probably is been tagged onto hepatitis B as the carrier. And that now is all beginning to come out. It's pretty well documented. My favorite in all this is the anthrax. Remember right after 9/11 where we mailed anthrax, somebody mailed anthrax around to all the senators and some of the news organizations? And you remember how they caught the guy and they prosecuted him and it was in all the major newspapers? No, didn't happen, right? But yet they know that that anthrax came from a U.S. government laboratory because it had a signature attached to it. So, kind of winding up a little bit of what we talked about before the break, there are the, thank you, there are the environmental factors. There are the things that are being done to us without our consent. To me, that's a de-evolution that's going on. And we could go on and on. Okay, I don't want to spend a lot of time. I think you all are conscious enough, you understand the game, all right? Incidentally, all of this kind of stuff, that last stuff, the experiments and that type of stuff, that's all on the internet. It's on my website if you want to get it. What I want to talk about now is the fact that my view of all this is that I am a physical body, but I am inhabited by a spirit. And so I'm really a spirit having a conscious experience in a material, all right? And my physical body has these cellular memories now that go back at least 1 million years, because we are able to do DNA regression, and that's what science is telling us. But we knew that a long time ago from the extraterrestrials, because they said, hey, we're the ones that did this. And so I look upon myself as being incarnated here in a physical body. My non-physical piece has a lot of different names. The one I'll pick is superconscious, simply because it has not that much connotation to it. I believe that I chose to incarnate here in a physical body at this moment in time in this place. And I did it because I have a role to play. I also believe that I am choosing every day the experiences. And to go one step further, I'm pretty sure that before I came here, I set the stage for all of this. Now, what happens when, this happens to all of you, by the way. This is not just me. When we come here and incarnate in these bodies, we lose all memory of who we were before. That's part of the game. That's part of the, since we're going to be playing a role, we have to be focused on this role, not be worried about who we were before, see? So we lose all memory of who we really are. And then if you really want to get into this, and this is something that has taken me a long time to be comfortable with, everybody talks about past lives and all this type of thing. No, all of this is happening simultaneously, because at the higher dimensions, there is no such thing as time. Time goes away. So all of these lives that people talk about living are happening simultaneously. Try to get your heads around that one. I know that's true, but I still cannot quite get there. So if I can do this, if I can choose that I'm here at this time and place, and I can choose my experiences every day, and indeed I had a hand in setting up the stage, then I'm pretty powerful, aren't I? Damn powerful. I'm pretty damn good. And what I want to talk about principally tonight is the fact that if I'm powerful and you're powerful, because I think all of you are individually very powerful, then collectively, if we decide we want to do something, we can make a transformation of this planet. We don't have to put up with that devolution that I was picturing before the break. We don't have to do that. We can decide that we've had enough and it's time to change, because we are extraordinarily powerful. When I was in the venture capital business, the way this all happens is that an entrepreneur thinks of what he wants to have happen. Then he goes and puts all of his energy into that, and guess what? He creates a company. It happens. Each of us has that potential. Every time you go into the kitchen, you think about what you want to do, you have an intention, and you create. We all do it all the time. And we can do it on a much larger scale. And if we're willing to go and do it on a cooperative, highly conscious level, we can change this entire world. So what's holding us back? Well, part of it is we lose memory of how powerful we are. Okay, given. And then we go through a domestication process. And the you know how, what we do to our children? We domesticate them, right? We teach them right and wrong, just like dogs and cats. We teach them right and wrong, and we reward them when they're good, and we punish them when they're bad. That's called domestication. We do that. And then we have some institutions we've set up that helps this domestication process. There's the schools and the churches and the media and television and movies and all this. That's part of the domestication, continues to keep us in our little boxes. And so after a while, there is something called a psychological cocoon that develops. And that psychological cocoon becomes our protector, right? Because we want to stay in this little box and it's not safe to be outside the box. Now, after a while, then the cocoon starts taking over. It starts behaving for us. It starts acting in our stead. And pretty soon, it's my cocoon talking to your cocoon, and it's not the real me talking to the real you. Think of the last time you went to a 7-Eleven or a checkout place like that. You know, your cocoon was talking to the person's cocoon behind the counter there. If it was the real you talking to their real them, you would have asked them about their family and how their children were doing and what they liked and what they didn't like. But we don't do that. We just have transactions. And that's our cocoon talking to their cocoon. My cocoon talking to your cocoon. And then, of course, it makes us fearful. Okay? Fear comes in here. Basically, it's imprisoned by superconscious. It's locked it up. So that's why we don't understand how powerful we are and the fact that we can go and make a difference. So then we take the superconscious, and it's in a box, so it's not very functional. We've got this big psychological cocoon. You put the two of them together, and you get beliefs. And everybody's got beliefs. We all have those. Think about the collective beliefs that we all have. You know, if we have a belief, think of how we defend that belief. Think of what we do with it. Think of the extent that we are willing to go to defend that belief. We're willing to go to war. We're willing to kill. We're willing to do all kinds of things in the name of our beliefs, all right? I happen to think that it's our beliefs collectively that are leading to the planetary destruction that's going on. Nietzsche said this, I think, extremely well. And that is, if you want to go and just have an easy life, you can exist inside your beliefs. If you really want to go and make a difference, then search for the truth. So we have a paradigm conflict here, folks. We have the de-evolution going. We talked about that. And we have our self-determination. And it's a race we're in. And it's coming to a head right now. Right now, it's coming to a head as to who's going to win this game. And we're not going to talk about the politics tonight and all of that. You can get that elsewhere. All right? But we're going to take a look at the fact that back in colonial days, there were these things called indentured servants. And these were primarily men that came here. They came from the European countries. And they signed a contract that they would come and work here for a period of time. And the neat thing about it is they thought that after that period of time they would be free men. Well, usually what happened is that the contract got extended because they misbehaved. So that it kept going for a while. Now, they lived at an almost slave-like existence, barely enough to get by. And they were told, hey, this is all right, you will get your reward in heaven. All right? That's an indentured servant. Today, we have pretty much the same thing. All right? We have the living from paycheck to paycheck. That's the way most people live. Most people don't have a lot of savings. A lot of their earnings go to pay taxes. 52% is the average amount of taxes that most of us pay. And when you add up the property tax, the sales tax, and all the other stuff that goes on. And I don't know anybody that's not stressed. And yet we're being told, hey, this is as good as it gets. You'll get your reward in heaven. All right? Not too much different than an indentured servant. Talk about our financial institutions and how they've been hijacked. In 1913, the Federal Reserve Board was created. That basically took the creation of money out of the hands of the government and put it in the hands of the bankers. So that if the government wants more money now, it goes to the banks to get it, all right? And we have a fiat currency that has been perpetuated worldwide. Fiat currency means there's no backing behind it, okay? It used to be there, it was backed by gold and silver and that type of thing, no more. If you look at a dollar bill, it's a promise to pay. That's what it is. You know, if you were to go, right now, a piece of gold, an ounce of gold coin sells for about $450 per ounce. If we were to go and put gold once again behind the currency, that would raise to thousands of dollars per ounce because there's so many dollars out there circulating around the world. So our financial institutions have been hijacked. And now we get back to that initial slide of 97% of what you grew up believing. Most of us grew up thinking that the economic system of the U.S. is the best, all right? That we have a free press, that extraterrestrials, if we believed in them, you know, when I was growing up, there were three things we didn't talk about. You didn't talk about sex, money, politics, religion. There was always those three. Well, extraterrestrials never even made the list. Okay? So, all of this list, okay? 97% of what you grew up believing is a lie. And the list goes on. We don't allow our children to have a larger reality. We tell them that those imaginary friends of theirs don't exist, that the only thing that counts are the five senses. And we're told there's a lot to be afraid of. And we're told that greed, that's just human nature. All right? And again, we're told that this is as good as it gets, that this is as good as we can make it. Well, I'm sorry, but I don't believe that, and we're going to do something about it. Now, as I was putting this presentation together, and these things happen to me from time to time, I was told I had to put this slide in here. And I tried several different ways to change the wording of this slide, and I was basically told that that was not acceptable, that this is the slide that had to be in here for all of you. And so I'm going to ask you at this moment to take a moment and consider what is unthinkable. To me, what's unthinkable is that all of this stuff we've been talking about so far might just be true. It might be true that there are extraterrestrials and that they're here more often than we possibly imagine. It might be true that they're giving us messages. It might be true that we are descended from them. It might be true that the government has done all these experiments to people. It might be true that the environment is indeed degrading and it's getting to the point where it's probably not even reversible. And it might be true that we're running out of natural resources. So to me, that's unthinkable because that package is just about more than I can handle, quite frankly. And yet I'm being asked to embrace it. Because until you can embrace it, you can't go any further. Einstein said you cannot solve problems using the same thinking that created them. So let's now talk about creating a new paradigm. This is the new paradigm that I see, that I believe is possible. I say it in three-dimensional terms because I don't know how to express it any other way. It might be a fifth-dimensional kind of thing, but I think there's a third-dimensional. And I think it's larger reality, unlimited free energy, everybody taking responsibility for their actions. And when was the last time we all spoke the truth to each other? When was the last time that you thought that you could trust a salesman, that he was telling you exactly the truth, or an advertisement? We don't do that. Think of what a world we would have if everybody were telling the truth. Something that simple. Or if we cooperated instead of competed. What kind of a world would that be? What a place, huh? So I think this is possible. I think if we decide that this is what we want, we can do this. So now let's talk about empowerment, because if we are not individually empowered, we're not going to be able to make a difference. Personal empowerment. Find your passion. Whatever it is, find what you are passionate about and pursue it. I encourage all of you to create a life mission statement. If you go inside, you know why you're here. You know, and you know. You know what you're doing here. Because you agreed to come here on a mission, to play a role. Try writing it down. It may take a year or two to do it, but try writing a life mission statement. It's an exciting exercise. That's how I got into this trouble, all right? I wrote myself a life mission statement. And then look at your beliefs. What do you believe in? Examine your beliefs. Because 97% of what you grew up believing is a lie. And then, of course, you have to decide, what are you going to do? How are you going to relate to this larger reality? How are you going to do that? And then ask yourself, where are you giving up your power? Is it because you like to eat? Have you got some addictions? Are you giving your power up to a corporation or to a career? Where are you giving up your personal power? I know I was giving it up. I was this fancy venture capitalist, all right? And then there's financial empowerment. I encourage everybody to be debt-free. This debt bubble we have going is a huge trap. It's going to burst. All right? And all of us that had borrowed money at very low rates are not going to have the wherewithal to repay it. And then you better find a sustainable lifestyle, because if what I'm talking about happens, you're going to have to find a way to sustain yourselves. I encourage people to have 20% of their assets, 20% in gold and silver. And then again, what are your beliefs relative to the financial situation? Examine those. They're probably, if they're a belief and you don't know for sure, then it's probably wrong. And then there's health empowerment, because if you're not healthy, you're not going to be any good in this process of trying to change this planet. And health means, again, what do you believe about your health? You know, I was convinced when I was growing up that I was this weak little kid. I was sickly and all this type of thing, because that's what my mother told me. And sure enough, I was this sickly little kid, all right? I didn't get out of that till I left home. And then all of a sudden I became real healthy. Funny how that works. Listen to your body. There's great knowledge there. Just listen to your body. It knows what it wants. And of course, then there's exercise. And if you're going to have a sustainable, you'd better have some skills associated with that. And we're talking about things like water and gardens, and what the Hopis say to us is, where's your water? Where's your food coming from? No, have a plan. And then relationships. Beliefs again. The larger reality. What's your relationship to this larger reality? If you're not at peace with everybody, then that's eating at you. It's taking some of your power. And then if you're going to go and be a party to this, you better find a community. Now I'm learning that Ashland is a very interesting community here, and maybe you have some of that, but you better have some close friends that you can depend upon, because this is a very intense process. And then you better have a relationship with God. The ETs tell us they don't believe in God. They say, we don't believe in God. We know there is a God. We know. We don't believe, we know. So again, it's the process of thinking and then creating. So see what we've been talking about tonight. See this world for what it is. Right at the moment, it's not a very pretty place. And then I challenge you to turn your back on it. Not many people are willing to do that. Very few people are willing to really turn their back on this whole mess and say, I'm going to go a different direction. Until you do number 2, you can't do number 3 and number 4. I encourage you to find a way to do the contact with extraterrestrials. There's a number of ways to do that. You can go to the Monroe Institute and learn how to do it. All right? You can go learn how to do remote viewing. You can go take courses from Stephen Greer. You can learn how there's 4 or 5 different meditative ways to get in contact with ETs. It can be done. We're not talking rocket science here. It's really easy. And then understand that you are extraordinary. You're extraordinarily powerful. You decided to be here. You helped create the stage. And every day you make decisions as to how you're going to live your life. You are very powerful. And last but not least, I would encourage all of you to hold the vision of a better world. Hold a vision. It doesn't have to be my vision. It's your vision. And we don't all have to think the same. And we're being told that if we go and do these things, that the off-planet people will come and help us. And then find some other people. And I know you're meeting here every Tuesday. Find some other people you can talk to about this and talk to them. I have set up something called the Cosmic Paradigm Network. I encourage everybody to join. What we are doing, and these are now several hundred of us from around the world, we are supporting each other because this coming metamorphosis, everybody understand what metamorphic rock is? Metamorphic rock is this rock that's been transformed by heat and power, heat and energy and pressure, all right? That's what we're talking about happening here. It's not going to be a pleasant process. And the reason we're going through this metamorphic process is because we aren't willing to wake up. And so things are going to continue to get worse until we wake up. So the Cosmic Paradigm Network is about a community of people helping each other, supporting each other during this time. And we exchange information because we all know you can't believe what you read in the newspapers. And everybody who's part of the network has committed to holding the truth, the vision, and collectively transforming things. And last but not least, I talked about it earlier, volunteering to help recreate after. My wife Heidi and I are on a trek. So far we've been to New Mexico, Colorado, Utah, California, and you can see where we're going over the next 18 months. So here's where you sign up for the Cosmic Paradigm Network if you're interested. It's on my website. Just go there. It's an easy process to sign up. It's a difficult road. And I think old John Wayne said it quite well. Just saddle up. And here is the invitation that has come to us from the universe. Can you grow up and come out and play? Thank you very much.
RVML Resource Center is a volunteer-operated federal 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organization. RVML is dedicated to providing easy access to a comprehensive collection of information on a variety of metaphysical, spiritual, and personal development subjects. RVML accepts and appreciates all donations. Material and monetary contributions are fully tax-deductible. This recording is not copyrighted and permission is granted to broadcast, exhibit, or duplicate all or part of this program for non-commercial educational purposes. This live presentation was organized and presented by the Rogue Valley Metaphysical Library and Event Center. For more information, please visit rvml.org.